SBC Media.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of the iGaming Daily, where I'm joined by James Ross and Danny Lee as we dissect what makes a great slot and whether the boundaries can be pushed too far in terms of slots theme. Later on in the show, we'll also hear from Callum Williams, a payment expert, as he's at the GBG event in London discussing all things crypto and specifically shining a light on FTX and the downfall of Sam Bankman-Fried. I'll start with you, James. How are you today? It's very cold. We're into December now, but how are you doing? Keeping warm, I hope.
I'm doing fine. It's a bit different being relegated because you've taken my hosting slot and now a guest, but no, I'm doing all right.
Promoted, mate. Promoted. You've not been relegated. Don't worry about that. And you ready for Christmas? I know you got a young one, so must be a pretty fun time.
You say that, but I mean, we've just taken the tree down last night from the loft, so we need to get that up. But because his birthday's in the same month, it is now trying to juggle his first birthday and his first Christmas, which is a nightmare. But we went Christmas shopping actually over the weekend, and the amount we filled his trolley is ridiculous. We've gone way too overboard with it.
That's the only way, mate. It's the only way. And Danny, how are you doing? We're going to be talking to slots today. It's very much a specialist subject, but in terms of how you're coping with December, how you ready for Christmas as well?
Yeah, definitely ready for that Christmas break that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And it's nice to be covering slots, a bit of a nicer break than covering tax like we were last week. But I am cold as well. I currently look like Kenny from South Park in the office. So
That's who you reminded me of. I was going to say, maybe we played Fall Guys, the game. I was going to say like a bean from Fall Guys, but no, Kenny's spot on, man.
Yeah, well, if Danny's Kenny, I'm not sure what that makes me and you, James. I guess
you've got I'll
be Stan and maybe
I'll be Cartman. All right. Got a bit of timber on for Christmas. Here we Cartman.
Didn't want to say you were Cartman, but
I'm just
you can take the role if you want. But yeah, onto our topic of discussion as well today. We're here to break down some slots, a bit of a state of the union on slots, if you like, where we're at as we head into a new year. And I guess my first question to you both would be, as we bring 2023 to a close, Danny, what have been the key slots innovations this year? And have there been any sort of standout themes in terms of the games that have really been hitting and drawing big engagement?
Yeah, I mean, we see the usual sort of slot production going on with a lot of seasonal slots sort of taking over the year a bit and sort of guiding you through the year. Seen some nice new mechanics that have been introduced this year as well. Coming to mind, there was the Collector mechanic from Elk Studios that I quite like, which was launched in the Pirates title that has now led to a sequel, so you must wonder if that's doing quite well.
What does that mechanic include?
So it's a lot of line movement and symbols sort of falling into place to collect different bonuses and stuff, rather than just obviously cluster pairs or scatter pairs or anything like that, pay line wins and stuff.
Oh, that sounds cool.
As well as that, quite enjoyed Infinity Respins from High Five Games, which was sort of brought from land-based titles online. That was really cool, sort of seeing a win sort of repeat on itself. But I think a lot of innovations I've liked this year have sort of come from more cross-collaboration in different businesses across the industry. So the likes of streamers getting involved in more content production, which I might touch on a bit later as well, and affiliates getting involved too. And I think that's what we need to see a bit more of as we go into the new year, that sort of better bridge between players and that side of the community with these businesses that, are trying to appeal to that side.
Yeah, to jump on what Danny said there, it's one of my key takeaways from 2023 at the moment is obviously the multiplayer slots have have just boomed. Well, I would say boomed. There's been one big key one. Slotmasters from Holy Grail, like that did really well. And we did a podcast on it earlier in the year explaining just how key it was in kind of getting over that hurdle of what makes a good multiplayer slot. And I feel like that's been one of the key trends. But Danny really did, and I'm sorry for the buzzword bingo, hit the nail on the head with the affiliate space. That has been the big trend in 2023. We've seen so much more cross-pollination between suppliers and affiliates and creating content and creating games. And you'll probably see that more and more in the next year or so. And
I guess you've seen that in how it reflects the content as well, right? The content that's come out has also been a bit more flamboyant, a bit more outside the box, because suppliers have been collaborating with different quarters and different minds to bring this type of content.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that data can provide you. It can give you a clear idea of what's working and what's not. But when you look at the affiliate space, and you definitely look at streamers, they are constantly communicating with their community. Like they're always getting feedback on what's working on certain slots, what's not working, what's engaged them the most, what's been the most thrilling, what's been the most boring aspect of certain titles. So, I mean, we've said it many times, these streamers are the key now to innovate and move forward, because they have in their knowledge and in their database the pathway moving forward to create stronger titles. And it's nice to see suppliers are now just suppliers are now utilizing that knowledge and working with the affiliates to create better titles.
Yeah, I think, innovating is not necessarily the wrong word. They're utilizing those guys and those guys and girls in their minds to sort of build a bridge to innovation and to know where to innovate, I guess, because the other side of that is the streamers have far more access to even things like comments and stuff like that, where they can really see what is not just making them tick in terms of slots, but also making their audience tick. So, yeah, a real good bridge to generating an understanding of what the audience wants. And Danny, you mentioned before about sequels. I guess, is that always... Not every game will set itself up for a sequel, right? And also, have there been any sort of specific examples of a good franchise or good potential franchise in 2023 that we could see a sequel of?
Yeah, I suppose, obviously, in terms of franchise news in the slots world this year, we've obviously seen Money Train 4. It's always a big talking point. In terms of potential other franchise, I mean, I did mention that Pirots game and how that's now led to a sequel, and I think that's the sort of way to go around these franchises. You need to look at it more from the side of creating that initial slot title that can sort of, have the potential to be turned into a franchise if needed to, because if you look at it in that way, any slot has the potential to be given a sequel. It's not like any slot is always going to stay as a standalone. But you do sort of wonder if studios that come out with these slot titles that end up becoming franchises actually had considered that being the case on its first release. Because I think at the start, you just want a slot that's successful. And then if you can create more than that, brilliant. If not, then you move on to the next one. So yeah, I think getting the initial slot right first is the biggest challenge. Any successful slot release has the ability to be given a sequel, and you need to focus on the things that make that initial slot successful, like a well-loved theme, a unique mechanic or design. And you look at like fishing franchises and those sort of themes that have sort of found a popular mechanic and just ran with it completely and keep coming out with new iterations. But they've found that initial title, which to me is the most important part.
I actually think a lot of slot studios don't have franchises or kind of sequels in mind when they're actually thinking about the title. Like you said, the success of a slot will determine if there's another one to be released. And it's kind of my cliche saying that humans are creatures of comfort. If a slot like Money Train, which when it was first released, it had great success, both from a commercial point of view, numbers, everything, data, like the engagement rates from it was fantastic. That's why you've seen so many more money trains being released, because players who have enjoyed that, they'll go back to the sequels, and that's relaxed gaming, retaining their players through the comfort of knowing these players like, oh, Money Train was great. Let's go to Money Train 2 and let's play that, and let's just keep going to a Money Train franchise. Because if these players have only got, let's say, 20 to 50 pounds, we'll go with the English currency. If that's all they've got very limited amount of money to spend. So they're going to go to something they're more comfortable with spending their money on. And that comes from a strong first slot, like you said. And that's why we'll probably see a lot more companies release sequels, but I don't think they go with it with the intent of making 4 or 5 titles from that one brand.
Yeah, it's interesting. We mentioned Money Train 4 and a piece on Casino Beats, I should say, a week or so ago, was detailing the marketing process that went into Money Train 4 and how it's all about the build up and everything's got to be done right in the process to make sure that even if the game is right and bang on there, it has to be pushed to the correct audience and it has to be marketed in the right way, how vital that is. So, yeah, really interesting there. But James, as you mentioned, it can come down to the allure of a sequel can come down to, comfort and knowing that game. I mean, we all experience that in every sort of walk of life, really, with, whether it's a TV show or whatever, you go back to what you know a little bit. How much then, if you're creating a sequel, is there an emphasis on to give it a new flavor, but not to change it completely, that it feels like a completely new game, so you retain that comfort a little bit?
It's massively important, because if you come out with a sequel, let's say the Napoleon 2 that came out, which was Slot of the Week, if you steer too far away from the original path of the first game, the players they'll instantly play it, and you've got probably about a 2-minute window where you've got to engage a player. If they're like, this is completely different, this is not what we fell in love with the first title, it's nothing like we experienced, actually, to be honest, then they're just they'll come off it and they'll find another game to play. So there's an importance to add something new and to, again, not to use the word innovate, but we'll say improve on the first title, but you need to keep the core elements of what created the original title to be a success. I think if you get that right and then slightly improve on it, you'll create another successful sequel. If you go too far across, down another path, you'll plummet a little bit.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I do think it's crucial not to sort of change what brought you to the dance a little bit. We have seen boundaries being pushed within slots as well. I think that's another subject to shift it on a little bit. But we do see boundaries get pushed in slots, and we do see some riskier subjects, touched upon within slots themes. We also see some comical and some satirical that really work. I think I remember a few political slots, based on Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, and there are some funny ones out there. But is there an urge to sort of push the boundaries and try and get as close to these lines of acceptable or edgy as possible?
I think if you're looking at a term of engagement, that might be sort of what they're going for a lot of the time. Because obviously there are certainly some studios out there that do like to push those boundaries with every release they do, or most releases they do. And the line, like, there's no such thing as bad publicity, comes to mind, as well as the fact that this is obviously an adult industry, that, some certain themes and designs can be taken with a pinch of salt in that respect. However, in terms of engagement, you do sort of wonder whether using such themes or characters can kind of take away a section of the audience for these certain slots. Speaking from our point of view, if there's a slot that we find maybe disrespectful or just outright wrong, then we won't cover it on the site for that reason. And you look at like maybe the potential that there might be some operator partners out there or aggregator partners out there, or even like certain jurisdictions where these slots just won't be successful in gaining that expansion that's so important in this industry.
Yeah, and I mean, the climate we live in today, the climate around the gambling industry as well, and just purely out of ethics, And, you know, from a moral standpoint, I don't think the big operators or any operators for that matter are going to want to be associated with something that is, you know, just plain immoral and does sort of, it isn't seen as right and sort of ethical.
There is a fine line that you have to judge these by, and you have to look into other industries. And Danny said it right, where we're an adult entertainment, we're over 18s. Like, so you can push the boundaries a little more because you don't have to worry about tailoring to a younger audience. But there is still that line that you have to adhere to. And there have been some slot suppliers, there's one in particular who love to push the boundaries in No Limit City, and they pride themselves on it, and they have produced some hilarious games. But they've also gone, I think, too far over that line, where if you look into the film industry, unless it's depicted as like historical accuracy, it wouldn't be accepted. It wouldn't be allowed if it's an 18+ film. You look in the gaming industry, I know there's likes of like GTA, Grand Theft Auto. They push the boundaries of what's allowed in video games, but it's never to the point of like atrocious acts of, I don't want to specifically say what the thing was in one of the slots, but it was very misogynistic. And you have to find that line. And I think some suppliers push it too far. And once you do that, you're not going to have that commercial success. Danny said bad publicity is still good publicity. I don't think it is. I think you then put a target on yourself from the operators thinking, right, we need to actually do more due diligence in looking at these suppliers. So push the barriers, you know, make it as fun as you want, make it as controversial, but read the room. Like, there was one, remember the Gulag, and you released it around the time the war with Ukraine and Russia just started. Read the room. Like, it's not acceptable. It's not appropriate. So there's that case.
Yeah. And is there a specific type of player that is more engaged with risky slots? Is that risky slots is sort of the wrong word? It is more engaged with sort of edgy slots that are sort of pushing those boundaries of, you know.
There's a slot tailored for everyone. That's what I would say. Yeah. And again, look at comedy. Like, there's so many different types of comedy that people are allured to. Some people like that kind of very dark comedy kind of style. But then you've got some who like more, just want of a better word, kind of like the PC comedy, a bit of a more of a woke style, which is fine. And you'll have that with slots. Like, some will like that riskiness with some of the slots. They'll find it a bit more humorous. Some of them will find it outright offensive. It's just, again, you're tailored to your audience, but then you have to factor that in when making it, that you're not going to have this grand appeal to everyone, which you see a lot of suppliers trying to aim for.
Yeah. Speaking of niche appeal, really quickly, James, I know you and Danny both actually are film guys. I watched a horror film at the weekend, and I've never been so genuinely scared in my life. It was called Speak No Evil. It was Danish. It was, pretty shocking. It was a good watch, though. I'm not sure you have a horror movie that actually fully scared you and left you a bit rattled that you've watched recently. Or...
I am awful when it comes to horror films. I think I don't handle horror. I don't handle jump scares very well. But then also when I was a film student, because you start learning about different narratives within films, I was just like, oh, horror films are so cliche. It's all the same. So I never really got into them.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to let that lie that you tried to pass yourself off as a film student. I think you watched a few Tarantino podcasts and you're calling yourself a film student, but...
I've got an undergraduate degree in film and media studies, I'll let you know.
I'm not sure I'm having that one. I'll have to check the records and get back to you and make sure he's not lying.
I will bring my diploma in.
And Danny, I don't know if you're a horror movie guy. I know you're a movie guy, but any movies that have probably shook you recently or...
Obviously, Halloween wasn't that long ago, so it's nice to watch a few horror movies. Then there was that film, it's come on to Netflix recently, actually, Talk to Me, that was done by some Australian YouTubers.
Horrific. That was rattling. That was,
Yeah, that was fantastic. And just to bring it back to slots, I think horror as a genre is like the perfect sort of way to look at these sort of slots that may be a bit riskier or got certain themes that not everyone's going to like. If you look at that area of the entertainment industry, some genres are great for appealing to just one type of audience. And there is that like big viewership there in terms of like horror movies, people that, you know, they might not be bothered in any other type of film unless it's a little bit scary or a bit creepy or just in the horror genre. So, but like James said, in a general sense of trying to appeal to as many people as possible, it's just not as effective. So I suppose it depends on sort of the motivation behind the slots in the first place.
Yeah, and I guess there's a loyalty thing there as well, you know, to play the other side of the coin. There's a loyalty thing there, like where if you have a sort of niche film like that, if you have a niche slot like that, although the audience is sort of niche, they are very loyal and they're definitely going to engage with it because it's catered very much to their needs. But I'm conscious we're sort of running to the end of our time here. I did want to ask you guys, you know, we are feels like the end of the year. It's Baltic outside. The snow is coming down, but that means we are about to head into a new year as well, 2024. And we are with the 4th of December, but we're getting there. What should we look out for this year in terms of slots? Any big titles? Any big innovations? I know you've mentioned multiplayer, but what should we look out for briefly?
Yeah, so me and James have sort of touched on this already, but I guess that just goes to show how important we think it is in the industry right now. But I think we're both always intrigued by collaborations with affiliates, with streamers, because it guarantees a lot of player perspective. And I do think it can often guarantee like quite a bit of success because there's a viewership behind the streamers, there's a readership behind affiliates that will want to get involved with the slots, and there's really good marketing opportunities across the board there as well. And we recently launched The Journey, a podcast series with Dreamspin involving some of the lads from Fruity Slots and how they're trying to transition from being solely streamers into like the slot production side of the industry. So I think it'd be quite interesting to see what comes from that, and again with all other areas of cross collaboration as well.
Yeah, the Dreamspins is an interesting one because it's for me anyway, it's the first streamers that have actually taken that leap to becoming slot suppliers. And I've spoken a lot to Josh, Jamie, and Will Barnes. Will's from Hideous Slots, Josh and Jamie are from Fruity Slots. And what they've got in their pipeline sounds exciting. Their first game, I think, should be out in the first quarter of 2024. They explain a bit more in the video podcast that we released this week. That's on Casino Beats. But it's interesting. And everything we've spoken about in regards to affiliates and working with suppliers to create slots, I think this will be the first evidence to see if what we're actually talking about is fact or wrong in a way. We might have been misskewed a bit. So it'd be interesting to see how successful it is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would direct anyone that's enjoyed this conversation to that podcast as well. A really fascinating insight with the Dreamspin guys, and it just talking about, you know, where their story started and how they got to where they are and the challenges they overcame. It's a really interesting one. And a good podcast as well today, guys. It's been very enjoyable. I've really enjoyed getting your insight on slots, and I look forward to hopefully revisiting this subject in the new year, and we can look at what has come to fruition and what has worked and what hasn't worked as well, because that's always interesting. But before we depart today, as promised, we're checking in with Callum Williams, who is at a really interesting conference in London, talking all things crypto and all things FTX. Callum, take it away. What's going on?
Hi, Callum Williams, checking in, a business journalist for Payment Expert. I've just got back from the GBG Downfall of the Crypto King event here in London, which was hosted by Jamie Bartlett, a best-selling author and podcaster who appeared on the BBC Panorama documentary covering how Sam Bankman-Fried caused the multi-billion-dollar collapse of FTX. If you was reading Payment Expert's weekly coverage last October of the Sam Bankman-Fried trial, you know that he was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and wire fraud as he awaits his sentence date in March next year. The tech space in London was a great intimate space that allowed for a free-flowing conversation between the panellists and the crowd. We even had anti and pro crypto people going at it, in reasonable, polite fashion. So that was quite entertaining towards the end. But no, the event really dug deep into how and why the FTX collapse unfolded, as well as the intriguing character and psyche of Sam Bankman-Fried. So, host Jamie Bartlett, he allowed Joshua Oliver, one of the speakers, he's a journalist from the Financial Times, to break down the motives behind the mishandling of customer funds at FTX, and was covering the Sam Bankman-Fried trial in New York as it happened in what he described it as an extraordinary psychodrama with a lot of Sam Bankman-Fried's closest friends and business partners at FTX testifying against him. Storm Thunissen, the director of the BBC Panorama documentary episode, just gave us a look into how young a lot of the FTX employees were, and she even said that most of them were under 30 and that this was probably their first job coming out of university. Even gave quite a funny comment on how most of the FTX employees would send off an email with an emoji at the end. So, it just really spoke on just how young a lot of these people were. And she even said that she reached out to over 600 people in total on the documentary. But for me, the most interesting speaker on the night was Sunil Kavori, who lost 2.1 million in the FTX collapse last year. He described the feeling of his stomach sinking once he found out the news of the exchange's collapse. It just really put into perspective just how damaging this was for a lot of the investors, and it was really eye-opening just to see how risky and how much of a volatile market the cryptocurrency market can be. And yes, this also did lead on to talks of regulation with the CFTC and the SEC over in America, and how who's going to take it over from there, who's going to regulate crypto as it is. But no, overall, it was a really interesting breakdown of the FTX collapse and the deeper meanings of why and how these crypto companies were able, and still are to an effect, to be able to run operations on their own accord without any real form of regulation. So keep your eye out on Payment Expert for some news stories covering this event soon.
SBC Media.